Thank you folks for dialing in. We are going to give it a minute to get everyone on. Thank you folks for dialing in. We'll just give it another 30 seconds or so just to make sure folks are getting on. Really appreciate your dialing in. More folks are getting on. So I think we're almost ready to start. Just a little bit. All right, I think that folks are on. Great. So I am Liz Powell. I'm the founder of G2G Consulting that organized this first ever Shauna M. Sorrells program, and specifically this grant program. And so I first wanted to thank you all for applying. We had amazing organizations make submissions. We're super impressed. Folks from all over the country, amazing different causes, just amazing work that you're doing. So first off, I want to start with that. Very, very inspiring. So I am going to share the speaking role today with my esteemed colleagues. We at G2G, which stands for Government to Growth, we work in government affairs, and we work with a lot of nonprofits that are looking to access funding, and as well as relationships, advocacy campaigns, all kinds of things. So my colleagues have a ton of experience and expertise, so I thought it would be really valuable to have them speak as well today. So just a quick intro on me. So I used to work on Capitol Hill, and I did a lot of policy work in health and social services, as well as some other areas. And then I started G2G when I met a lot of nonprofits and entrepreneurs who were doing great things, but they didn't know how to navigate government. So we try to help grow organizations by working more effectively with government. So that's just a little bit on my background and G2G, which I started, we're going on our 14th year, which is insane to me, which also means I'm old. So anyway, so that's just my quick background. I then wanted to pass it over to my colleague, Greg.
Great. Thanks a lot, Liz. Really excited that everybody could join us. My name is Greg Kapkar. My background is I've got more than 2 decades of government relations work for private nonprofits as well as companies. I have a master's in public administration. And before coming to G2G, I spent about 10 years at a statewide association as their legislative director, working on health and human service policy. And then I managed a small nonprofit and a foundation before I joined G2G. And currently at G2G, my role is, in addition to having a portfolio of federal, state, and local clients, our particular niche is with nonprofits specifically, and also bioscience companies and innovation companies. And we manage a publication of a monthly bioscience grants report with different opportunities. So we're going to go ahead and go to the next slide. But as we do that, I just wanted to let everybody know that what we've decided to do is we're going to elevate everybody on this call to a panelist, because that's going to allow us to have more of an interaction where you can unmute yourself and even be on video if you like. There is certainly no obligation to be on video at all. So as our team elevates you to a panelist, we didn't want you to be surprised as to why you're seeing a notification about that. But we wanted this to be more than just having questions and answers through the chat box. So just wanted you to know that that's going to happen. Just as a friendly reminder, I think everybody now we're going almost on a year with COVID and these Zoom calls. So be sure to mute yourself and also mute your camera if you don't want to be on. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to go ahead and just jump right in. Liz, oh, yep. So here's what we're going to do. Go back a slide. Sorry about that. Yes. So we're going to give just a brief background on G2G and the purpose of the Shauna M. Sorrells program. We'll run through some of the winners and the applications, but more importantly, we want to talk about some key factors that really make for strong submissions. And we're not intending, and certainly we want to, we're not going to go into specific organization submissions and why yours wasn't selected. That's certainly not the purpose of this webinar, but it's more of a learning opportunity as to what made strong submissions. And then we'll close with tips in general from our work with companies on grants and just government funding in general, and the relationships that we have built over the years with grant managers and program managers and even grant reviewers from panels that oversee grants from the NIH and the DoD, Department of Defense, and even foundations. And so we want to close with tips from what we hear from them that companies and organizations and nonprofits can do to make stronger grant submissions. And then we'll finish out with some Q&A and just have that open interactive dialogue. So just another friendly reminder to mute your mics and your camera. And let's go to the next slide, please. I know there might be a little bit of a delay. Okay, so just a little bit about G2G. I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but it is important to mention, and Liz said that we were founded 14 years ago by Liz, and we have built a tremendous bipartisan team, and I want to stress that we are bipartisan, and we are a group of really passionate people that are really determined to make a difference. We grew from a one-office operation in Cleveland to now having locations in Columbus, Ohio, and of course, Washington, D.C. And we even have some satellite operations in Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and at one time, even in Minnesota in the innovation corridor there. But we have a combined experience of well over 80 years in government and private sector between our entire team in all three of those offices. And it's pretty impressive that our members of our team have worked on Capitol Hill for not only members of Congress in the House and Senate, but we've staffed big committees like the Armed Services Committee, Small Business Committee. We've led appropriations requests for members of Congress. We actually have members on our team that are past administrations with the White House, advisors to former presidents and vice presidents, even worked at NIH. We've got some folks that served in presidential campaigns as state directors. Somebody from our team also worked for then Senator Mike DeWine, who is now the governor of Ohio. We've got team members that have worked at state trade associations, national trade associations, state capitals with speakers of the House, minority leadership, even court bailiffs at the municipal court level and local health departments. So just a really super team to be working with. I mentioned we're passionate about advocacy, working with nonprofits. We have helped organizations get earmarks in Ohio's operating budget and capital budget, as well as government funding from grants and appropriations. We've got an impressive total of $315 million that we've secured for clients. So that's just a little bit about G2G if you weren't familiar with us before. And we'll go to the next slide and I'll turn it back to Liz to talk more about the Shauna M. Sorrells Award.
Thanks, Greg. That was really helpful background and way to start off. So here are some great pictures of Shauna with her son Isaiah and Joshua and Caleb, the three brothers all together. There's so many wonderful things to say about Shauna. She is the reason that we're doing all this. And so every time we connect, I just want to make sure we revisit just how amazing and awesome she was as a person. Very generous, kind, warm, loving, giving, funny, fun, silly, just wonderful person. And then also an amazing professional and national leader. Her expertise was in public housing, but she also worked for other health organizations, before that. And she and I even collaborated a bit on a STEM initiative within public housing. So she really understood how all these health and social services are integrated. And that's why the Shauna M. Sorrells grant is about more than housing. It's all the health and social services that that folks need. So an amazing person, and just wanted to make sure we covered that before we move on. So I think we can move on to next slide. So this is a great quote by Shauna. Words are just a start. Action is what is needed. And so we're all about action. And so are all of you, clearly from your grant submissions or application submissions. So next slide, please. So here's just an overview of the program. As you know, this last fall was the very first time that we launched it. And it's focused on providing grants to nonprofits that dedicate meaningful services and programs to women and children, and especially women of color, communities of color. That's really important. And we really want to address those who are most vulnerable and in need. It also aims to honor her legacy, which I was just talking about, and her work in making a difference. I think that's really important to this program. The program organizes the annual Opening Doors to Giving event, which again, last year was the first one. So we're hoping to do this for years to come. And the whole goal is to definitely announce the winner. And this year we were able to surprise folks and have many winners. But it's also to facilitate giving. We want this to open doors to giving, make it easy to giving, raise awareness about a ton of different organizations and causes, and make it super easy to just click and give. And even if it's only $10, $50, that makes a huge difference. And I did have friends who had dialed into our first Opening Doors to Giving event and, text me, hey, I want to give to the organizations, like all 3 finalists. I want to give to the runner-ups. So I know just by having that awareness and sharing what you do, it did open some people's minds and hearts to want to give and to make a difference. So that's what I'm hoping for as we keep moving forward over the years. And then finally, the program brings together smaller nonprofits. I mean, all nonprofits are welcome. In our experience, it's the smaller ones that need the most help getting off the ground. And G2G is all about growth. So it's a nice fit. We want to make sure that we're really helping all nonprofits with insights and expertise, as well as with the network. We want all SMS program folks to be able to connect with each other and help each other. And it could be something as minor as, oh, you do staff meetings once a week. Oh, I guess we should do that too. How do you do those? Or it could be, that's your accountant. Oh, that's a great accountant. Could you give me that contact info? That could be our accountant. It could be, hey, there's this event focused on breast cancer. Oh, I didn't know that it tied into, Baltimore. Great. Can we work together? So it could be anything that you want within this network, but we want this to be a network, a family of support for nonprofits. So, so we have a big vision of lots of things we can do to change the world together. You're all a key part of that. So that's just an overview of the program. And what it means to actually execute that is to do regular events throughout the year. And, silver lining with this situation, Zoom has really opened up a lot of opportunities for collaboration and connection. So we will do more Zoom programming throughout the year, probably later in the spring, summer, leading into the fall when we launch the program, the second annual Shauna M. Sorrells grant program. And we are planning to do it earlier. We thought it went a little too close to Christmas and the holidays and that rush of December. So we're going to try and push it up and do a little bit earlier next year. But anyway, that's just an overview of the program, what we're doing, what we're trying to do, and our vision for the future. So next slide. And I think I'm passing it over to Becky.
I think, Liz, you're going to kind of just review some of the semifinalists and the finalists.
Oh, okay, I'm doing that then apparently, sorry. All right, so these were the semifinalists. You can see on the screen, great organizations. And What we wanted to do is to call them out. So again, people know the work that they're doing, and can either see if there's ways to collaborate or make donations. So you can see all their websites are there. And we will post, as said earlier, we will post this recording and all this information on our website. Next slide. These were the finalists: Africa Matters, For Three Sisters, and SciTech to You. Again, information is there to click later. All amazing organizations. And the online voting system showed an awful lot of support for these groups. So we were really excited to see that and loved how it really got a lot of folks involved, thousands of people involved voting online. So that was great to see, and they're all awesome organizations. Next slide. And the winners. So the final winner was For Three Sisters, who received $10,000. The runner-ups each got $1,000. And then the semifinalists each got $500. So we were happy we were able to give some funding to everyone at some level. So next slide.
I think I'm taking over here. So I'm Becky Watts. Thank you all again for joining. My background, just quickly, is I've been with G2G for over 12 years prior to joining this team, in which I help manage clients, help access funding at the state and federal and local levels of government, and help kind of just strategize on best ways to access funding and change policy. Prior to joining G2G, I worked for the governor of Ohio when he was in the Senate, and I managed his appropriations process and was his director of appropriations back when Congress was still earmarking funding for individual organizations. So at the time, we reviewed, almost 2,000 applications every year, me and a team of folks, and made recommendations to the senator on what we wanted to try and fund in the federal budget. So I've been reviewing applications for a long time. And prior to that, I worked in the Ohio State House and at the local levels of government. And I also did some work for a nonprofit. So I was on the side of applying for funding as well. This slide, we wanted to highlight all of the applicants, or as many as we could, over the course of the next 3 slides, which again, Liz said we will be sharing with folks, just to showcase for you the range of applicants we had. For this particular program, we had over 80 applications, and we appreciate all of you who took the time to submit applications. And again, we want to use this opportunity to not only share information about these individual organizations, but also, just to encourage folks to see, what's out there, and kind of, who else is seeking this type of funding. Next slide, please. So we wanted to get into, over the course of the next 2 slides, Liz and Greg and I will be kind of talking about some of the key factors that make a strong application. And this is not only in the case of the Shauna M. Sorrells program, but in our experience, having, again, worked to help clients access funding at various levels of government, and through agencies, through the legislative process, and in some cases through community and foundation funding as well. I apologize for my dog. So first bullet: clear and succinct explanation of what your organization does and how it fits with the purpose of the opportunity you are pursuing. Very, very key. we can tell and reviewers can tell when you've just cut and pasted from another application. And having been on the writing side of it, I know how if you're pursuing multiple, grants at once, it can be overwhelming, and sometimes that just ends up being what happens. But the more, when we were on the side of, reviewing all these applications for Shauna M. Sorrells, it became very clear who had taken the time to explain in a succinct way what your organization did and how it aligns specifically with what Shauna M. Sorrells grant program aims to do. So that is number one key factor, I would say, for making a strong application. Number two, explaining exactly how the funds would be used, what your vision was, and again, tying it back to the purpose of the SMS grant. We love seeing some of the words like this hyper-focused, vision for how to use this award. Should I receive it? It gave us just, as sort of reviewers in this case, confidence in your organization and your ability to spend this funding in a meaningful and impactful way, should you be the recipient. So those were kind of the top two. I will pass it over to Greg.
Great. Thanks a lot, Becky. And then building on that, I mentioned earlier that, we work with a number of program managers and actually consult a lot of times with grant reviewers for our clients who are actually submitting grants. And we ourselves are on the writing side of things as well. When we're actually gearing up now for the federal appropriations process. So we help clients and write appropriations requests and fill out those forms. And so we find ourselves in the same position of how do we get this information across? And following instructions is a really key factor. And when faced with 80 applications, in this particular case for the Shauna M. Sorrells Award, that piece about following instructions becomes kind of a weeding out factor. So for applications that didn't follow the instructions, it just made it easy, unfortunately, not to say that it wasn't worthy, but following instructions is one of those key things. And we hear that time and time again from these program managers and grant review panelists at NIH and the Department of Defense and other places. So certainly in the case of our program and others, if you're looking to apply or are applying for grant foundations, just kind of keep that tip in mind. And then we also found that explanations that talked a little bit in detail about how the money was actually going to be used. And maybe it was augmenting some other funding that was received, but it was clear that it was beyond just funding like a staff position. Not to say that a staff position wasn't important for carrying out a program, but in those cases, some of those were strong applications, but they were able to tell us how that connected to the bigger picture and how that then related to the impact that the mission of the Shauna M. Sorrells program was. So, following instructions and making sure to, in a concise, succinct way, talk about the impact that the money is going to have. And then Liz, I think you're going to follow up with this last bullet point.
Yeah, so we wanted this to have a really concerted effort to address women, African American, Latina, Latino, and underserved communities. That was really important to us because I think that a lot of those communities are hurting the most, and definitely with COVID, the whole health disparities issue has risen to front and center for everyone. And so that was a really important focus. And we noticed in descriptions, if people said that they were focused on that, on executing in that way or not, like some didn't specifically say that and others clearly did. And so I think that was a really important factor for this program and the evaluation when we were narrowing it down to the semifinalists and finalists. So I think that's it for that slide. Next slide, please.
So we're going to kind of just go through this with all three of us and share some of these final tips, which again, we have gleaned not only from this program, but from our experience in accessing government funding. So knowing your needs, number one, doing an assessment of what it is within your program you need to get funding for that might be a good fit for government versus community funding versus foundation, et cetera. And kind of mapping that out strategically is number one. Greg?
Great, thanks. And number two, before I jump into that, I would say that this final tips is really kind of like a checklist that we wanted to offer as a resource to all of you, that as you're putting together your requests or looking at how can you augment your funding, here are some things that we find are important. And we had nonprofits of all sizes apply this year. We had ones that had $50 million budgets all the way down to startup shoestrings started by kids in high schools and things like that. So the $50 million organizations probably have teams that are writing grants and have resources for that. But we want to echo what Liz said earlier. One of our niches at G2G is with nonprofits, and how can we help support them? And so look at this list as kind of from that vein. And one of the things that we work really diligently on with clients is developing this list of target funding resources. Who is it that we can go after? Where are fits with our mission for the organization, whether it be foundations or government programs or kind of a combination of the two. So really kind of sitting down and making that list of where can we go? Where do we fit? Doing the Google research and just really mapping it out and having what we would call a strategic roadmap of what direction are we going and how might we get there. Liz?
Yes, and then understanding how the application system works. I think this is really important. The criteria that they're looking for, what are the key factors? Sometimes I know with government grants, they will post previous recipients and they'll even post not the full application, but like the narrative or the abstract or something. You want to think about timing. There's just so many aspects to that application process. And it's really, really worthwhile to spend the time, and I know it's hours, to really research and make sure it's a good fit for you and that you are following these directions and instructions, and you're looking at what they funded before and all those types of things. And also, you don't want to be shy about asking them for insights too. That's a lot of what we do at G2G. We are constantly talking to program managers in government, for example, to see what exactly they're looking for. Are there nuances that aren't listed in the listing of criteria, for example? So just make sure you do a full 360 look at everything that's involved in making an application, a strong application, whether it's a government opportunity, a foundation opportunity, a competition, any of those. Just really take the time to know it. And even if it's like silly little things like font size, that matters. Program managers have told us they throw it out if it doesn't have the right margin size, for example. So really do look into that thoroughly.
And making sure you're a good fit for the opportunity. Is your mission of your organization align again with the nature of what the organization is trying to fund? In your assessment that Liz just mentioned of your kind of 360 view of how the application system works, make sure it's worth your time to spend writing and putting together your grant application.
Absolutely. And then tied into that, Becky, would be this piece about, once a company knows or a nonprofit knows that they're a good fit for the submission, really having a compelling message. And for me, this ties into, there's descriptions we have and missions and things like that, but really telling a story of why the funding is needed, how it impacts, taking that step beyond kind of the generic description of the organization that anybody can find on a website or that we have on brochures and things, but create that compelling message. And when we do this, we're we're thinking about what's the issue, problem, and solution, and really talking about that succinctly. So that compelling message is key.
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, building relationships is key and not being shy about asking for background before you make a submission. Again, whether it's government, foundation, corporation, whatever that funding source is, it certainly doesn't hurt to reach out and ask, hey, could I do a 30-minute call to find out a little bit more about this program? You will get all kinds of insights. And, most people, they want to be helpful. And so we have found all range of helpfulness. So some will just do a call and say, yep, you meet the criteria requirements, and that's it. Others will say, it really sounds like your work in A is better than your work in B as a fit for this program, which is great. That's such valuable insight. Or, I'm hearing the leadership also includes maybe some other organizations that are could be partners. Why don't you all apply together? Wow, that's great insight. Or, you know what? Hearing about what your organization does, there's actually another grant that's about to come out. I think you'd be a better fit for that one to get a heads up on a funding opportunity before it even comes out. Foundation side, I've heard things like, well, we actually have more funds than we thought, so we're going to give, more grants than we thought. Okay. Or we're going to do another round. So normally we do this once a year. We're actually going to do it twice a year this year. So there's just little tidbits that just aren't always posted on a website or in the package that you download of what goes into an application. So I really am a big, big, big fan of developing relationships. And again, that's what we do at G2G. I think it's so helpful. And, even if the deadline has passed, it's still worth it to talk to the program manager to find out, okay, so that's what they're looking for. So that's what we need to work on the next 6 to 9 months when the next application opportunity opens up. So even if it's passed, it's just a great way to find out what's really going on, how the program works, if you're a good fit. If you're not now, can you be in the next year? And then finally, to have that person from within pulling for you. So you're not just pushing, they're actually pulling for you. That's really, really critical, especially in the government grants work that we do, but I think in foundations as well. And, just having some relationships with foundations, we've been able to help nonprofits go after what we call capacity building grants. And we wouldn't have even known of that unless we had talked to the foundation about that as an avenue to get funding. So build relationships, that's that one.
And picking up on that, I mean, one way to do that is the next bullet and inviting your targets out for tours of your facility, of your your work site, show them programming in action. We are aware that during COVID, that has changed, but there are virtual ways to do that. Hosting webinars, but we have found that in this effort to build relationships with these targets, be it government, foundation, etc., having them hear from not only you as the leader or the development person for your organization, but hearing from the people you serve, from board members. We hear that a lot. That is highly impactful and meaningful to a legislator, for example, to hear directly from your board member, because it's somebody who's volunteering their time, not being paid to kind of deliver that message. And then it gives them a little more sense of buy-in when they've seen your program in action, see the people that you impact, see the way that you deliver your services. So inviting them out for tours, and then again, to Liz's point, just having them have your organization in the back of their mind when they're having internal conversations later on down the road. And that has absolutely been a way that we have secured funding for organizations, is just having that sort of advocate on the inside, if you will, who has been out, who has seen what you do and understands how impactful your program is.
Great, thanks, Becky. And then I think we've said this before, but it's probably worth repeating, is really in the writing style, being succinct and clear. And probably one of the more important things is if there's a specific question, like get to that 30-second elevator pitch and answer that question directly and right away. And sometimes less words is more. And so to the extent that you can be just direct, clear, and succinct, it'll make for a crisp, sharp submission.
Yeah, and also don't forget the letters of support that you can build among your supporters and collaborators. I think that can help with some submissions, not all, but some. Those can be helpful too. And being succinct and clear is super, super important when either verbally communicating or in writing, because people just don't have a lot of time. A lot of reviewers, they prefer more graphs even than words sometimes. And then also make sure you're just answering questions directly. Don't try to be evasive. It's like, this is the one time you got to really be right on and direct. It makes a huge difference in how you get rated. So that's that one.
And then we've mentioned this before, but just try to avoid cutting and pasting your generic descriptions of your program. Any customization you can do to, again, just kind of showcase how your program fits with the opportunity you're pursuing, and it becomes clear to the reviewers that you took the time and have a program that fits well.
Yep. And then building on and adding to what Liz said about building relationships, that following up and just staying in touch with those potential funders, staying on their radar, looking for ways to, if we're talking about legislators or elected officials in particular, getting them on mailing lists, sending them invitations if you have open houses, and look for those ways to stay in touch. So maybe it's sending, sometimes this can be a little tougher with government reviewers, because once you make a submission, there's that dark period where you can't, have any interaction with them, because they don't want to have like appear as though there's being influenced. But, if we're talking about legislators or elected officials or foundations, even the program managers in the foundations, I think of here in Cleveland, like the Gun Foundation and Cleveland Foundation, all those program officers, they're ripe to come out and see what's going on in their community. And so those are the types of people you want to have on your mailing lists. When we get out of the COVID situation and you're having open houses or, volunteer events, invite them to those. And even if they don't come, that's okay. They're aware of what you're doing. And so you're looking for those creative ways to keep in touch and follow up.
Yeah. And closing out with never give up, but I actually thought of something else I just really wanted to reiterate, the customizing. When we were reviewing for the Shauna M. Sorrells grants, and there were really only a handful, but those handful that actually said, with the Shauna M. Sorrells grant, we will do this. That kind of customization, I mean, frankly, melted my heart. But in a more intellectual level, it's wise to do that. No matter where you're applying, that saying, the name of the organization, their purpose, and how you align with it, like that's just so important across the board. So I just, light bulb was going on. I was like, oh, I just want to re-emphasize that one. But definitely never give up. That's like super important. Lots of rejections, kiss a lot of frogs, whatever analogy you need. That's life. And I don't think any of you would be doing what you're doing if you didn't already get that. It takes an awful lot of determination to succeed. And I've got countless stories. I've been doing this kind of work over 20 years where we got a big fat no and we turned it into a yes. And it was because we were determined. And sometimes it took over a year, sometimes 2 years, but you can get there. So there's lots of ways to turn a no into a yes. So please keep that in mind as well.
So I think we're going on to the next slide, and that opens up for Q&A, right? Yeah. So we wanted to invite everybody. You've been elevated to a panelist, so you are now able to kind of unmute yourself and even share your screen, or not share your screen, but turn your video on if you want, but, if you have questions or, we just wanted to give an opportunity here in the last 15 minutes or so to have an open dialogue about anything that you might be thinking about for grant submissions or funding or things. So Liz, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, we really just want folks to be able to ask questions or make comments. So please share.
This is Zainab Abbas. I'm one of the recipients of the Shauna M. Sorrells grant. And I just can't thank the program enough for the support and the belief in our program. But I just want to reiterate, like, everything, all the recommendations that were made. I mean, starting out, I've made a lot of the mistakes that you are now saying not to make. And I think that's one of the key things that really helped me get the grant. Also, recently I just received another grant, and a lot of the things that you've mentioned, I've implemented in those grants, and I was able to get those grants. I mean, I do have some questions, but I now I can't think of them right now. But I just want to reiterate, everything you said, I'm taking it to heart, and there are even some things in there that is like, yeah, that makes sense, So I want to again thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, the work that you do with SciTech2U is awesome, and then I've just enjoyed our own one-on-ones, and so that folks know you can contact any of us. I put our emails there on purpose, so we want to be a resource to you and to help you answer questions, navigate whatever we can do. We want to be helpful to you as part of our family.
Thank you.
I think another piece that we perhaps didn't talk about in detail, but that example of additional grants that potentially were leveraged by funding that you received or that you intend to leverage with the funding that you're pursuing, that can also go a long way. So for us to understand, like, oh, you're going to take this $10,000 and turn it into 20 because you have these other targets identified, and you really think the combination is going to help you deliver your ultimate outcomes. That can be really impactful too, and especially when we pursue government grants and many or government funding and whatever, either through grants or earmarks or what have you. In most cases, the government wants to know that, in fact, you're not just you're not just counting on the government for that funding, and that, in fact, there is additional funding coming from the private sector or individual donors, what have you. So that is something else to consider highlighting in applications.
Hey, Becky, as you were talking, it did make me think, and we had not internally talked about this next question that I'm going to ask, so my teammates might be a little bit nervous here, but we intentionally tried to make this submission process easy for everybody, that it wouldn't be, tons of work, tons of research, that it should be information that you have at your fingertips, and that hopefully it didn't take hours and hours like, many big grants require. So I'm curious and want to ask kind of our participants, do you have any feedback for us on, the application process, what worked, what didn't work, what we could do better next year? So I'm interested in some feedback on that if anybody's willing to share that.
Yeah, that would be great.
This is Zainab again. I'm sorry, keep talking. But yeah, I really thought that the application was really easy. I have another grant partner, like she has her own nonprofit organization that she found. And we would kind of like search for grants and look for grants. And I'll say, oh, well, this one is easy. We can really do this, knock this one out like really quick. And then we kind of look also at the value that we're getting from the grant. Is it worth our investment, like our time investment to invest in writing the grant? Because there's some grants, that'll take us maybe 2 weeks to just get through. And we're like, okay, they're only giving us $1,000 and they're asking us, 2 weeks worth of work. No, it's not worth our time. Because for me, my organization, I'm essentially outside of my board, the only staff that's really working, running the program, applying for grants, working on the accounting side. So our time is really precious. So we kind of look at, okay, what are we getting versus how much time investment we have in what we're applying for, or what we're applying for. So I'd like to say, Shauna Sorrells, I think was very helpful. It was impactful, and it helped us, it was encouraging for us, like, okay, we can do this. We don't really need to go to a grant writer to help us kind of get through this grant. So I'd like to say that the grant was fairly easy. And if we stick to the recommendations that you gave, I think we could apply that across the board. So, I mean, it was the grant itself, the application was easy and it was nice. I really wouldn't change much about the grant. I think it's good.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, this is Rhonda Sanko, and I'm with Airmen to Freedom. We were one of your runner-ups or semifinalists, and I would agree with her that it was an easy process. There was a point where I think that in the original application it said that you were going to reach out by a certain date, and I don't think I couldn't find that that messaging that I was expecting. So. That's the only feedback. I actually had a colleague that was working on it with me, and she and I together, we were like searching our inboxes going, did we get that? Did we get that? I guess we didn't get it. So just that consistency of communication, which is an issue for all of us.
So maybe even, so if I can round it, so just clarification on notification to all applicants that, thank you for applying, but sorry, you didn't receive it. Is that kind of the
even that? Yeah, I mean, it's not the one we all want, but it does at least close that loop, right?
Yeah, very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, but it was easy, and we too feel deep gratitude for having been selected.
Thank you for that. I'm looking in my box now to see if I have your email. I wonder if it went to the wrong person.
Could be. Maybe that's part of the challenge.
Yeah, and I do know, because we heard from many of you and we saw it ourselves, that we had some technology challenges with the voting. That the initial program that we were using was really only for, I think, like 200 votes, because it's our first year. We didn't think there'd be that many. And we have a website designer who was helping us with all this. And then we saw, wow, there's actually we got a ton of applications. We got a ton of people voting. We need to upgrade or get a different system. So that messed us up for a bit. So change that. And then also, I think the timing of when we were able to post wasn't quite what we thought it was going to be. And so we definitely had some kerfuffles this first year that we are working to fix next year. So we're working on that. And so that, and then the communication to be super, super clear that we are emailing the right people with each of these organizations. So that's really helpful.
So I do want to say, though, thank you so much for standing this up in the midst of a pandemic. And I do think it's very bold to just step out and say, and guess what? This is going to be annual. We know the world is kind of like crazy right now, but guess what? This is our vision and this is what we're going to do. It's nice. It's good. Thank you. I did have a question about other grants. Is there a way to speak to that when you're talking about kind of layering funding? Because I'm fairly new to grant submissions. And so it's always like, well, do I tell them about the other money or do I not tell them about the other money? Is it going to weigh for us or against us? Is there any advice?
And Rhonda, are you mentioning that in your grant application? Or is that what you're asking?
My question is,
yeah.
like we have a very small endowment. and we do get government grants.
Mhm.
What I love are the foundation grants because that's where the heart is.
Yep. So, I think, yeah, it is kind of that. When I was at a couple different nonprofits and we applied, I can see the pros and cons of mentioning it, not mentioning it, because you don't, so the way we always approached it was if there's a way to weave it in, like, well, first of all, if they're asking for it or not, that's one question.
Mhm.
And then, but to Becky's point, if you can show how this money leverages other money or how it all totally supports stuff, I think that makes for a strong submission. So I would say that I don't see a standard cookie cutter approach that says always include that information. I think it's kind of a case by case decision that has to be made. Does this information add value to our proposition and what we're wanting to accomplish?
Also, yeah, I agree. It is a little bit of a catch-22 when to include it and when not to. But also consider, I think Greg makes a good point. You gotta have to, on a case-by-case basis, consider what it is you're applying to, and if does it help establish credibility of your organization to show that you've received government funding, for example. Oh, there's an automatic, like, this must be an organization that's going to spend these dollars, impactfully and going to do their reporting, et cetera, like that. That's I think one benefit to showcasing some of those other funding sources. But you're right, you do kind of sit there and think, should I should I share with them that we're getting funding and from other places? So I think, yeah, it is kind of case by case.
This is Zainab again. I just wanted to add to Rhonda's question that some grants do ask you how else do you, are you going to fund this program if we don't fund houses? So some grants do ask that question, but I do have a question now that we're talking about the grant funding and applications. One thing that I find to be very, very challenging is finding the right grants to apply for. So, I mean, I'm familiar with the foundation or now Candid, and I've looked through them and it's almost like looking, and I've said this before, but looking for a teeny tiny needle in a mountain of hay. So do you have any suggestions on how to kind of hone in for my specifics, outside of putting in, the keywords? Is there another strategy I can use?
I think for small nonprofits like yourself, it becomes a bandwidth issue. And so, where can you go to get the biggest bang for your buck? And, there are some paid services that you can get to help kind of keep some of that straight. But again, that could be a funding level, a funding issue. I think doing the grant searches by keyword, that's actually one thing we do for our clients. So we've got a team of folks that are actually doing that to see where they can apply, and that's all ranges of government. But I think it goes back to one of the final tips that we had given of knowing what your need is. So once we know that, then really researching where are the funding opportunities that apply to this. So maybe there are foundations in your home community and in the state. Maybe there are some state sponsored funding opportunities. So really just kind of taking the time to do that research, coming up with that targeted list, and then setting up a system of, okay, how do I stay on top of what these funding sources are offering? So I wish I had a magic bullet for you, but I don't know, Becky, if you wanted to add to that, or Liz, or if that even answered your
Yeah,
question.
I just think maybe, in terms of government grants and those types of things, just identifying who your particular legislator or city council person or and congressperson are, and starting with at least those kind of three individuals, those offices, and getting to know those offices and getting on their distribution list as they're sending out things is another way to just kind of start entering into that world. And most of them, they want to help fund constituent organizations because it gets it gets them potential publicity too, and they get to say that they're helping you do your work, kind of boots on the ground. So that's one way to just kind of get to enter that world as well. But yeah, there's unfortunately no like magic bullet.
Yeah, just to add to that, to what my colleagues are saying, I think you can have, it's a great internship project to just Google like crazy, start with your very local community, see what grants are there. So like Cleveland, Ohio, for example, we do a lot of work. There's Cleveland Foundation, there's Gun Foundation, there's, established foundations that are all about that community. So I would start there to get a list and then go state. Are there statewide organizations? Like I think for that, like regional focus is a really good idea, and just Google like crazy to just start to build a list. I also think to complement that, exactly what Becky's saying, call your state rep or your state senator and say, hi, I'm ABC organization and we provide a homeless shelter for this community, whatever it is. We are looking for grants. Could you help us find out about grants? Is there a list that we could get on, an email list? So now they know about your organization, you're a constituent, so they have to do something for you, at least be helpful. And then you could do same on the federal level, call your member of Congress. There are some members of Congress that actually produce once a week or once a month a great list of here are some new grants that just came out from the federal government. Some are better than others, and so that could be something to track too. I think though, for the smaller nonprofits or for the nonprofits with less funding resources, start local. That's going to be, I think, an easier, what people say way too much, but lower hanging fruit. Not that it really is, but it's like slightly easier. You've got that connection. So those are just some other thoughts to add to what Becky and Greg were saying.
So I'm sensitive to the time. We could we can probably take one. I mean, we could probably talk all morning and afternoon, but sensitive to the time, want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we could probably take one more question, and then Liz, do you want to go ahead and wrap up with?
That would be great. Yeah. Any questions? Okay. Well, we're here. Our emails are there. I think you all have my emails, my email. So please let us know if there's any other questions, ways we can be helpful. Stay tuned. We'll keep organizing regular events to help nonprofits. We've thought about even bringing in like a guest speaker to talk about the ins and outs of actually how to write a grant or how to do PR, like all kinds of resources, tools, information. We want to just keep helping nonprofits. So watch for that. And then before you know it, it'll be the summer and we'll be gearing up for the second annual Shauna M. Sorrells event. So looking forward to that. I think we've got a final slide that just shows some final pictures of Shauna and information on to watch out for in the future. So thank you all for dialing in. Really appreciate it. And thank you for all the great work that you're doing to make a difference in the world. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.